Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, "Neighbor said I cannot go outside when she is outside because I am spying on her." Bit of a long story, but I felt like telling it as I am bored at the moment. So this has been going on for a year now. I have lived in my home for about 7 years, but have owned it since the late 90s. I used to rent it out before I moved in. Back when it was a rental, my neighbor put up a waist-high picket fence in the front of our adjoining properties. It comes over on my side of the property a little under a foot. When I moved in, I honestly didn't care that much as we got along relatively well and I tried to be peaceful with my neighbors. Last year, she is having all her fencing replaced as the old one's falling apart. I see her outside and ask if we can put the fence that is on my side down the actual property line. And she completely lost her crap on me. The way she reacted, you would think I reached across and slapped her. I did not engage and immediately called a survey company and had them out the next day. She did as well. Both came back a week or so later, confirming the fence was on my side. About a week after that, code enforcement showed up regarding a house under construction across the street from me, completely unrelated to the fence or anything. He parked in front of my house and was standing in my yard to take pictures of the house across the street. I came outside not knowing who he was and spoke with him. Once I knew what he was doing, I came back inside. As soon as he left, she came outside screaming at the top of her lungs, calling me an a-hole, etc. for calling code on her. I will admit, I lost my temper and came outside and we had a screaming match. I called her a stupid cow and a bunch of other choice words. 20 minutes later, the police show up and she claimed I just started screaming at her for no reason and she was in fear for her life. What she didn't know is I have 2 cameras in my front yard and the entire exchange was caught as she was in front of my house when she lost her stuff. I showed it to the police and they left quite irritated with her. The biggest mistake I made was posting about it on my Facebook group, which is quite large and are members of our community. She called the police on me again for cyberbullying and inciting threats or some other BS. So to make everyone happy, I deleted the post. She called the police on me a 3rd time a few months later for cyberbullying again, though I'm not sure what for as I had not posted anything else. The cops were confused as well and they left. Few months later, I'm on my porch having a cigarette and she's in her van, stops in front of my house, rolls down her window calling me a damn a-hole, waves her arms at me and takes off. Again, caught on camera. So I figured, screw it, and posted the video to my group. Sure enough, she calls the police, though this time they turn on her after I show them the footage and tell her she needs to leave me alone. She got pissed and started yelling at the police. A month or so later, I'm having a tree trimmed on my other neighbor's side who we get along with, and she called code enforcement trying to say I did it without a permit. Got thrown out as it was a camphor tree. She called the police again and when they showed up she would not answer the door. Me nor the police still have no idea what that call was about. Few weeks later, a detective comes by my house saying she's been investigating this case and I've done nothing criminally wrong and she's going to speak with my neighbor to inform her of just that and to leave me alone. My neighbor loses her mind on the detective. Keep in mind I've never once called the police on her, code enforcement, etc. Week after that she installs Nest Google cams pointed right at my front door and windows mounted to a pole. Nothing I can do about it as in Florida there's no expectation of privacy at the front of your house and neighbors can mount cameras at you. About 2 months ago, someone broke into my storage and stole all my Roundup. I checked my cameras, but unfortunately, it is too dark outside, so all you can see is someone with a flashlight over my neighbor's fence while someone else is rummaging around in my storage. I have since upgraded to night vision cameras. At this point I am getting tired of the BS, but I go over and speak with her in person after 1 whole year of this. I recorded the convo on my phone and made her aware I was recording as I don't trust her. We speak for about 10 minutes, but in a nutshell I tell her that we may not like each other, but we are neighbors and we have to live next to each other. And I would like to just go about our business and lives. She agrees surprisingly. Couple months pass with no issues. Then we come to yesterday, which is the crown jewel of insanity. My boyfriend went outside to talk to his mom and I get a text from my neighbor saying we are not to come outside when she is outside as we are spying on her. Ironic considering all her cameras pointed at me, and if it continues she will take this further. Also in the text she threatened to call code enforcement because I detailed my van with a buffer and it was loud. I promptly told her to F off and she will not dictate when we can or cannot come outside, and if she keeps screwing with me, I will file for a restraining order. Not as eventful as other stories on this Reddit, but I thought I would share. And Ripe Stars, I'm curious, have you ever had any bad experiences with awful neighbors? Let us know in the comments if you wish. And the next one is entitled Neighbor thinks she has a right to our cabin/land when we are not up there. My family owns a few cabins up in Michigan that we rent out throughout the year. We have one that is our main one. It is on a lake perched on a hill, so you can see it from far away. My siblings and I all have kids now and are all in our 30s, so someone is usually up there from April through November, with maybe a few empty weekends here and there. Our neighbors on the bottom of the hill suck. They are a couple from out west who ripped down the 2 old cottages on the land they bought and built an ugly modern looking home that would fit in a large city rather than on a lake. The bad thing about building such a large home is the lack of yard space, and they love to cry to us about how their kids have no backyard, and if we could sell some of our yard to them it would be great. Well, we love our yard. It is big enough that we had 2 weddings there, can have a full family reunion with 100+ people and still have room to play cornhole or other yard games without being in the way. So every time this family has asked to purchase a part of it, we say no. We do have an old chicken wire fence between the properties and we have grass, whereas they have just forest floor around their home, so it is really easy to see where the 2 properties stop. So just last weekend my dad got a call from one of our other neighbors that they saw the bad neighbor up on the hill walking around our cabin with a few other people she did not recognize. So my dad did what every homeowner would do and called the cops. He is drinking buddies with a few of them during the warmer months, so they were out to go check the place out really quick. Now this part is all from the cop my dad is friends with. Turns out when they got there the bad neighbor was walking around with her friends trying to set up a kids outdoor winter park in the snow. The cops asked if she had permission and she lied to their faces, saying she was in the process of closing on the land and that she is ripping the cabin down to turn it into a small snow park for the area. Well, the cops told her that she was trespassing, that they were called here by the owner who they were friends with. I guess bad neighbor got really quiet and started to try and walk away, but was ticketed along with her friends for trespassing. I guess they also laid into the ladies that if a kid got hurt while they were out here illegally, they would be liable for anything, and then he said who is recommending my family put up a restraining order if she is caught up there again. This is not the first time she has been on our property without permission. We have caught her out on our dock smoking and she has picked a few of our veggies from the summer garden, both of which are on the other side of the hill from her. We are going up there once it gets warm enough to install more cameras, as right now we only have ones above the doors and garages. Edit. Well, I showed my dad this and he laughed really hard. We both agree with everyone who is saying we need a higher or newer fence. We do for sure, and now my dad is thinking of building a stone wall. We do have solar lights out there and motion lights above all the doors along with an alarm system, but yeah, now thinking of getting a motion activated game cam and a spotlight down on the hill. And guys, if you have watched until here, please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support the channel. Thank you so much in advance. And the last one, aka the title story, is titled "Build a driveway across someone else's property without permission? Pay the price." Not sure if this is pro enough, but here it goes. I was visiting my friend at his dad's house in an area where the land is so steep all the driveways have to switch back up from the main road to the houses. A straight driveway is not an option because it would be steeper than the building code allows. A few doors down the road there lived a nice old couple who until recently had a vacant lot next door to them, but the lot had sold and the new owner had started construction on a new house. Unfortunately, the lot was so steep that the new owner built his driveway partly on the old couple's land. It was carved out of the hillside with an excavator. This probably wouldn't have been a big deal if the new owner had approached the old couple first and asked nicely, but did he? Well, would I be telling this story if he had? No. In fact, the old couple had no idea what was happening until they came home one day to see a huge scar in the hillside snaking up from the road in front of their house, across the corner of their property and winding upwards to where an excavator was working to prepare the land for their new neighbor's house. They were pretty upset, but being nice, reasonable people, they figured it was an honest mistake, so they went over to talk to the machine operator. He didn't know anything useful, but he was happy to give them the phone number of the new property owner. The old guy gave him a call and politely explained the situation, but his new neighbor, whom he had never even met, was having none of it. He flat out denied that the driveway crossed the property line, and he was rude enough that the old guy was pretty upset. At this point, the old couple were not sure what to do. They double-checked the property pins to make sure they were right, and of course they were, but after further conversations with the new owner, it was clear he was an unreasonable guy who was not going to come to the negotiating table willingly. The old couple did not want to take legal action because that would have been expensive, and frankly, the damage to their yard was already done. At the same time, they couldn't just let someone walk all over them like that, especially if they were going to be living next door for the foreseeable future. So the situation stewed for a while as construction continued on the new house until one day when my friend's dad saw the old couple in the neighborhood and they started chatting. Of course, they told him the story about the a-hole new neighbor. Now, my friend's dad really likes the old couple who don't have a mean bone in their bodies, so he was pretty pissed about the situation, and when he went home he couldn't get it out of his head. That evening, after a few beers, he had a brilliant idea. He called up the old couple, explained his plan and asked for their permission to carry it out. They chuckled and gave him the go-ahead, so he hopped into the rusty old full-size pickup he kept as a second vehicle and drove it over to the old couple's place, where he parked it across the encroaching driveway, making sure it was entirely on their property. The next morning, the work crew arrived bright and early to find that they couldn't drive to the house they were building because some jackass had parked a crappy old F-150 across the driveway. They saw the note in the window with my friend's dad's phone number on it, so they called him to ask what the F is going on. He explained that he had permission from the owners to park there and that no, he would not move his truck so they could get to work. Furthermore, if anyone attempted to tow the truck, they would be charged with trespassing and theft. There was no way the construction guys were going to haul all their tools up the hill by hand, and they didn't want to get in the middle of a legal battle, so they just called the new owner to let him know that they would be taking the day off and that they would continue to take days off until the property boundary dispute was resolved. The new owner called the old couple in a fury, but the old couple told them the same thing. My friend's dad told the construction workers basically the vehicle was parked on their own property, so if he had a problem with that, he could go F himself. To make an already long story shorter, the new neighbor rented a while, but eventually he wanted his house to be built, so the nice old couple ended up with a significant sum of money in exchange for an easement allowing the driveway to pass across the corner of their property, and my friend's dad got several thank you cases of beer and the satisfaction that comes from putting an a-hole in his place. Edits, phrasing, this occurred in a small town in Canada. For those who think I made it up, thanks for thinking I'm so clever, but judging by the number of similar stories in the comments and people asking if this was in X town, I think this happens pretty often, not too surprising considering the number of houses built each year in the world. Regarding the legal questions and comments, the reason the guy built the driveway where he did was because it was cheaper and easier than making it all on his land, not because there was no other option, so most of your points, if not all, are moot. I'm on mobile, so I cannot paint a picture, but imagine two lots next to each other on the uphill side of a road with the property boundary perpendicular to the road. The older couple live on the left when you are looking uphill. The new driveway is for the property on the right and it snakes up the hill in a roughly S shape. The bottom 50 feet or so of the driveway crosses the old couple's land to reach the road. I'm not sure if any trees were harmed in the making of this post. The driveway was done by the time I saw it, but the couple didn't make that an issue, so I suspect not. And yes, my dad's friend drove after drinking a few beers. Every hero has his flaw. And the next one is titled, "Don't want to trim your bushes? I will make you remove them completely." I know the title sounds like I am a 65-year-old man who's constantly running to the front door yelling at kids on the other side of the street to not play on my lawn, but hear me out. By the way, I am from Germany, so I apologize for some of the vocabs not being used right. We've been living in a mid/upper class street of my town for around 10 years now. Due to regulations that our real estate agent did not mention when selling it to my mom and dad, our foundations were set lower than the ones of our neighbors, which was not much of a problem until the neighbor right in front of us, we have a small sideway in the street where our and other houses are located, so our houses are just 4 meters apart from each other, started to grow bushes to seal off his garden from the outside world. When we noticed them getting bigger, we did what every person would do and jokingly reminded him to please keep the bushes in check so they don't grow too big. They ignored it for as long as they lived there, which freaked my mother out. She is mentally ill, which ultimately led to her not being able to really work anything but an approximately $500 job anymore, despite her only being in her late 40s. Me and my brother were not able to clean our front yard as often as it needs to be cleaned due to school and university being very stressful. We would have to clean it on the daily basis, even in summer, because their bushes were shedding leaves left and right. Another thing that was annoying was that our rain drains for our front porch and garage were stuffed up with the leaves and would regularly overflow. My neighbors then moved out about 1 year ago and a new couple moved in who we first thought were nice. Turns out they were even worse than the other neighbors and even mouthier. They made very clear that the sealed off garden and their house having a higher foundation than ours and the rest of our neighbors' properties were the main reason they bought it and they won't change anything about it. My mom was getting so freaked out about all of that, keep in mind that she is ill, that she was close to selling the house. The neighbor kept being annoying as hell and even threw parties in his garden, which oftentimes were way too loud and kept all neighbors awake, resulting in us or one of our neighbors having to call the police. So one day my mother looked out the front door and snapped after seeing how many leaves and other stuff from the neighbor's bushes were laying in our front yard. She ran out into the garage, grabbed a lawn bag, put a bunch of stuff that was laying in our front yard into it and threw them in front of my neighbor's door, which is illegal in Germany. A few hours later my neighbors came to us being petty and all smug, saying he would sue us and that we would have to pay loads and loads of money for ruining his front yard with our garbage, etc. Afterwards he took photos of our house and even zoomed into our windows, illegal as well, which I was lucky to see through my window and record him doing it. I then proceeded to look into city regulations and soon found out that we could not really do anything about their leaves falling on our front yard, but there is an extra clause in the regulations which states that this only applies for as long as the other party's living conditions are not compromised. When our neighbor then went through with his lawsuit, I was completely prepared to ruin his day. The judge wanted to make it a quick case, but our lawyer showed her all the evidence that clearly showed him that his leaves were first compromising our living quality by blocking our drains with his garbage, and second, he was breaking privacy laws by filming our house without consent. Furthermore, my mom has a disabled ID due to her illness, which combined with us telling her, the judge, for how long we had to endure all of this, led to the charges against us being dropped and him having to pay a fee for breaking privacy laws and him having to do something against his bushes. My neighbor was then given two options on how he could proceed. First, he somehow manages to stop the leaves from falling on our property, or he has to tear everything down and has to build another form of protection which would not compromise our living quality. He had 1 month to find a solution, but ended up not finding one, which led to him having to tear down the whole thing. My mom was happier than I had ever seen her in the past 10 years and sat through the whole thing. The only thing that was missing to make all of this perfect was her having popcorn. And guys, thankfully I've never had to call the police on any of my neighbors, but I'm curious, have you ever called the police on someone, especially your neighbors? Let us know if you did in the comments. And the first one is titled, "Neighbor posts pictures of my son all over town, so I help his tenants sue him." I live in a small town next to a city that really has a little town feel to it, but not without it feeling like I am living in the boonies. I moved in my house 15 years ago on a street that has maybe 5 houses on it. I get along with everybody near me to the point that we have a street party 3 times a year to get to know each other. The one no-show is always the guy that lives across from me. Let's call him passive-aggressive neighbor. He owns and lives in a duplex that is kind of tucked behind some trees and has a paved driveway that leads to it. But it is open enough that I can see his renter's side of the house. He's the one guy that has lived on this street longer than me. For the first 10 years I never saw the guy. He was a recluse and I recognized that. The first strange thing that happened was when I hired painters to paint my house. Even though I have ample parking, for some reason the painters wanted to park on his side of the street. The next day concrete blocks were lined up on the side of the street of his property. Which was kind of ridiculous considering a car has never ever parked there in the 10 years I had lived there. Also, as I said, his house is down a long driveway, but whatever. Like I said, I have plenty of parking and at the time I thought it was funny. Now my revenge story. A year and a half ago, my wife received a letter with no return address and no name in the letter. What it was a passive-aggressive letter saying, "Hello OP's wife, you are a person that knows a lot of people around here. Can you please make sure these boys stay off my property?" And in this letter were printed photos of 3 boys. One of them was our 7-year-old son. One of the other boys was my son's friend that lived next to this guy, and the boys were using his driveway to cut to his friend's house. Now, I was thinking the guy could have had some balls and knocked on my door and talked to me, but it was a fair enough request, so the 3 boys and their parents had a meeting at my house where we told them under no reason are they to go on his property again. All the boys said, "Okay, no problem." It was during this time I found out that the father of my son's friend had an ongoing legal battle with the PA neighbor about the property line. 2 days later, I get a knock on my door and it was another neighbor that lived down the road, and he handed me a printed sign saying, "If these boys are seen on my property again, I will call the police." And printed on it was the same 3 pictures of my son and his friends. The friendly neighbor then told me that this was posted on every power line and streetlight post in a 6-block radius, so the nice neighbor and I walked around and removed them all. But I was pissed, who does that? So I took all the signs and the PA letter to the police station. The officer basically said, "He's a bad neighbor, but he did nothing illegal." I again talked to my son and asked him if he has been on his property again, and he said, "No way." I then showed him the letter and the signs and told him, "This guy's pretty creepy, please stay away." So in the time from this incident to the last summer, nothing has happened, but the father of my son's friend suddenly passed away. This forced my son's friend and his mom to move away. This summer my son, now 9, was playing in front of my house when a young boy came from the renter's side of this house and said that him and his single dad just moved in. So of course they became good friends, and I then told the boy's father the whole story about his landlord and my son, and in no way can he ever come to his house, but his son is welcomed any time in mine. About a month later, single dad comes to our house and shows me one of PA's neighbor's famous letters about his lease. It is for only 2 parking spots and he is violating his lease. I guess his girlfriend had been parking on the driveway with plenty of space, I might add, at night mostly. Also, he was working on his motorcycle, which is also against his lease. Single dad had been living there for 1 month and was already getting evicted. So here was where I could get my petty revenge and told him to go ahead and use my land for his girlfriend to park for his booty calls and to work on his bike. A couple of days later, I get a knock at my door and it is a man I have never seen before. It turns out to be PA neighbor and he wanted to discuss about his tenant's girlfriend parking in front of my house. I told him that I gave him/her permission to park there. He then started to argue with me and I said, "Hey, look, I don't own the land in front of my house. The city does. What do you expect me to do? Put cement blocks in front of my house or take a picture of the girlfriend and post it everywhere?" I then told him to F off and slammed the door in his face. The next week I get a text, single dad's girlfriend's car had been entered, she did not lock it, and the glove compartment had been rifled through. An old phone was taken and another passive-aggressive unsigned letter saying not to park there. So, with no proof, the police could not do anything to his landlord and said it was a civil matter. Luckily, I had a camera set up on my house and I sent the video of PA neighbor going through her car and I emailed it to single dad with a statement of what PA neighbor has done to us in the past. Single dad moved out a week later but went ahead and sued his landlord. I just found out that with the help from me, single dad won his lawsuit and got $8,000 from my neighbor. And you know guys, from what I've gathered so far in my personal experience, there's always this one douchebag in each neighborhood. Do you have a person like that in your neighborhood? Let us know in the comments. And guys, unfortunately, we have already reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed today's stories, and if you haven't already, please also go to patreon.com/ripeyoutube, where I upload exclusive Reddit videos starting at just $3 a month. This is a great way to support me in case you are interested, and the chance for me to become independent from YouTube revenue. Thank you so much for watching, please don't forget to subscribe and like the video, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.